Welcome to the Grail of Truth Bible Study. We are doing Leviticus chapter 4 in the ESV, English Standard Version. And we have Sharon, our fellow Bible studier, along with us here. And if you want to participate in these Bible studies, you can go ahead and leave a comment below and let us know. Let you know when we do these Bible studies. We do it online, and you can join in and participate. But please like, comment, and subscribe and share. And without further ado, let's get into the Bible study. Leviticus chapter 4. All right, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the people of Israel, saying, If anyone sins unintentionally in any of the Lord's commandments about things not to be done, and does any one of them, if he is the anointed priest who sins, thus bringing guilt on the people, then he shall offer for the sin that he has committed a bull from the herd without blemish to the Lord for a sin offering. He shall bring the bull to the entrance of the tent of meeting before the Lord, and lay his hand on the head of the bull, and kill the bull before the Lord. And the anointed priest shall take some of its blood of the bull, and to bring it into the tent of meeting. And the priest shall dip its finger in the blood, and sprinkle part of the blood 7 times before the Lord, in front of the veil of the sanctuary. And the priest shall put some of the blood of the horns of the altar of fragrant incense before the Lord, that is in the tent of meeting, and all the rest of the blood of the bull he shall pour out on the base of the altar of burnt offering that is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And all the fat of the bull of the sin offering he shall remove from it, the fat that covers the entrails, and all the fat that is on the entrails. And the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them at the loins, and the long lobe of the liver he shall remove with the kidneys, just as these are taken from the ox of the sacrifice of the peace offerings, and the priest shall burn them on the altar of burnt offering. But the skin of the bull, and its flesh, with its head, its legs, its entrails, and its dung, and all the rest of the bull, he shall carry outside the camp to a clean place, to an ash heap, and shall burn it up on a fire of wood. On the ash heap it shall be burned up. If the whole congregation of Israel sins unintentionally, and the thing is hidden from the eyes of the assembly, and they do any one of the things that by the Lord's commandments ought not to be done, and they realize their guilt, when the sin which they have committed becomes known, the assembly shall offer a bull from the herd for a sin offering, to bring it in front of the tent of meeting. And the elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the head of the bull before the Lord, and the bull shall be killed before the Lord. Then the anointed priest shall bring some of the blood, some of the blood of the bull into the tent of meeting, and the priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil. And he shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar that is in the tent of meeting before the Lord, and the rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering that is at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And all its fat he shall take from it, and burn on the altar. Thus he shall do with the bull. As he did with the bull of the sin offering, so shall he do with this. And the priest shall make atonement for them, and they shall be forgiven. And he shall carry a bull outside the camp, and burn it up as he burned the first bull. It is a sin offering for the assembly. When the leader sins doing unintentionally any one of all the things that by the commandments of the Lord his God ought not to be done, and he realizes his guilt, or the sin which he has committed is made known to him, he shall bring as his offering a goat, a male without blemish. He shall lay his hand on the head of the goat and kill it in the place where they kill the burnt offering before the Lord. It is a sin offering. Then the priest shall take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour the rest of its blood at the base of the altar of burnt offering. And all its fat he shall burn on the altar, like the fat of the sacrifice of peace offerings. So the priest shall make atonement for him for his sin, and he shall be forgiven. If anyone of the common people sins unintentionally in doing any one of the things that by the Lord's commandments ought not to be done, and realizes his guilt, or the sin which he has committed is made known to him, he shall bring for his offering a goat, a female without blemish, for his sin offering which he has committed. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and kill the sin offering in the place of the burnt offering. And the priest shall take some of his blood with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and pour out the rest of its blood at the base of the altar. And all the fat shall be removed, as the fat is removed from the peace offerings, and the priest shall burn it on the altar for a pleasing aroma to the Lord, and the priest shall make atonement for him, and he shall be forgiven. If he brings a lamb as his offering for a sin offering, he shall bring a female without blemish, and lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and kill it for a sin offering in the place where they kill the burnt offering. Then the priest shall take some of its blood of the sin offering with his finger, and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering, to pour out the rest of its blood on the base of the altar, at the base of the altar. And all of its fat shall remove, as the fat of the lamb is removed from the sacrifice of peace offerings, and the priest shall burn it on the altar on the top of the Lord's food offerings. The priest shall make atonement for him for the sin which he has committed, and he shall be forgiven. Okay, so that's a description of different types of offerings for sin offerings, essentially. And one of the things you notice here is that it's possible for the high priest or a leader to sin on behalf of the entire congregation, because as the leader, their actions affect all the people that they're responsible for underneath them. So a sin of someone in a high position has the ability to affect the whole nation. And so atonement is done with the bull, in essence, to forgive the sin of the entire nation. So we see this particularly in the case of, for example, David, when he atones for some of his sins and so forth, how his sins can affect the entire nation, or put the entire nation under threat. Which is true for any leader. If they make bad decisions, that can affect the entire people they're responsible for protecting. The same holds true for the high priest. So all these offerings are basically kind of somewhat the same type of system of offerings. One thing I want to note, though, is that in the case of the bull is not, the remains of the bull, so to speak, are not actually burnt on the altar of the offering that's in the tabernacle. They're actually taken outside the camp and burned outside the camp. And so there's a prophetic kind of Easter egg in this one, because this is referenced in the book of Hebrews, where it talks about how Jesus himself was taken and crucified outside the camp. And so he's kind of a sin offering for all the nation, or all the people. And not only all the people of Israel, but all the people of the world, essentially. So in that sense, it shows that Jesus himself was a sacrifice, but he's a particular type of sacrifice. He's a sacrifice for the sins of all the people. Sharon, what does your summary say?
God tells Moses the description and instructions for sin offerings for the priest, bull, congregation, bull, rulers, goat, and common people, goat. For the bull offerings, everything apart from the fat and kidneys, burnt on the altar as before, is burnt outside the camp. The blood is smeared on the main altar and on the incense altar in the holy place and before the veil of the sanctuary. For the goat offerings, the remaining portion of the animal is not burnt outside the camp. Yep.
So, again, we're just kind of going through the different types of offerings. One thing you'll also notice here is that these are for unintentional sins. There is a case where there would be an intentional sin, and as we'll find out later on, that's actually a possible death penalty sin, because what happens is, if someone is basically completely rejecting the covenant they're under and saying that they're going to just go against the law, and it's like a form of treason or rebellion, basically. And so that type of treason against the covenant they're under basically puts them under the death penalty, because if you remember, when they entered into the Mosaic covenant, this was done with the sprinkling of blood and so forth, but basically what it entailed and what it meant was that by the Jews entering into the covenant and their offspring, it meant that if they violated this covenant, they could be under the death penalty, and they all agreed to go into this covenant. So if somebody sins intentionally and says that they're going to go against the covenant and just reject it, that can place them under the death penalty. So these sin offerings that are being talked about here are unintentional sin offerings, which is different from intentional. In other words, a sin where you just say, I don't care, I'm going to go do this anyway, I completely reject God's covenant and so forth. That type of person who does that under the Mosaic covenant could be under the death penalty and actually could be stoned. So, but we'll find out more about that in later on. So, did you have any questions on this chapter?
What did you say the bull thing was prophetic of?
Yeah, so the bull, the remains of the bull are taken outside of the camp and burned, whereas many of the other offerings are actually burned on the altar. So that's prophetic of Jesus being taken outside and crucified outside the walls of Jerusalem. Because his sacrifice is a sin offering, but he actually wasn't sacrificed in Jerusalem proper. He was taken outside, and that's where he died on the cross. So that type of sin offering being for all the sins of the people is what this is prophetic of. So any other questions on that? Okay. All right, well, we appreciate you listening to Leviticus chapter 4 with us. And please comment, like, and subscribe if you have any questions. And we look forward to you joining us on future chapters as well. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.